The Children of Green Knowe, Chapter 3. He slept long and well. In his dreams he was swimming towards the house in the dark when he heard the creak of oars coming to meet him. He tried to shout, but it was too difficult to do while swimming. In the effort, he woke up. The funny thing was that lying there with his eyes closed, he could still hear the creak-crock. No, it couldn't be oars. It must be the rocking horse. He sat up in bed, and it seemed to him that the horse had just that minute stopped rocking. The only sound he could hear now was the slow tick-tock of the old clock. The room was in dim half-light because the curtains were still drawn. Tolly jumped out of bed. First, he put his precious mouse back between the two china dogs. Then he went to the rocking horse just to stroke its real silky mane and to pretend to see if it was out of breath. Then he ran to the window and knelt on the window seat behind the curtain to look out at the view he had not yet seen. When just at that moment Mrs. Oldknowe came into the room, all she could see of him was the soles of his pink feet. As she pulled back the curtain, he turned a happy, excited face to her. Oh, look, he said. It was a brilliant sunny morning, and all the view was sparkling blue water, right away to the low hills in the distance. From his high window he could see where the course of the river should be, because of the pollard willows sticking out along each side of the bank, and because there the water was whirlpooled and creased and very brown and swift, while all the miles of overflow were just like blue silk. "It really is like being in the ark," said Tolly. "Yes, all the children used to call it the ark. Your grandfather did, and he learnt it from his father, who learnt it from his, and so on right away back. But you called it that by yourself." Tolly sat in his pyjamas on the rocking horse, making it go creak-crock, creak-crock. "Do you know," he said, "when I was lying in bed with my eyes shut, I could hear the horse go creak-crock, just like this. But when I opened my eyes, it was quite still." "And did the mouse squeak under your pillow? And did the china dogs bark?" "No," said Tolly. "Do they?" Mrs. Oldknowe laughed. "You seem ready for anything, that's something," she said. "Now get dressed and come down to breakfast." Tolly found his own way down the winding staircase, through the music room that was like a knight's hall, down the winding stairs again, and across the entrance hall with his polished wooden children and queer sticks of flowers, and into the room where he had first met his great-grandmother the night before. Breakfast was on the table, but she was standing by an open door, throwing crumbs onto the doorstep for the birds. There were so many of them that they seemed to drop from the branches of the trees like ripe chestnuts when the tree is shaken, and as many were going up again with a piece of bread in their beaks as was coming down to get it. A few yards beyond the doorstep, the garden was under water. "The birds are very hungry. You see, they can't get worms or seeds or ants' eggs under the floods. Would you like to be introduced to them?" "Yes, please," said Tolly. "Come here, then," said Mrs. Oldknowe. And although her back was rather bent and her face was wrinkled, when she looked at him so mischievously, he could almost imagine she was a boy to play with. They love margarine butter. Better than anything, she said. Hold out your hands. She spread his fingers and palms with margarine carefully all over, even between the fingers, and then told him to go to the door and stand still, holding out both hands, with his fingers open. She stood beside him and whistled. In a minute, tits and robins and chaffinches and hedge sparrows were fluttering around him, till at last one ventured to perch on his thumb. After that, the others were soon jostling to find room on his hands, fixing him with their bright eyes and opening their wings and cocking their tails to keep their balance. They pecked at the margarine on his palm and between his fingers. They tickled dreadfully, and Tolly wriggled and squealed so that they all flew away. But in a minute they were back. "You must keep still and be quiet," said Mrs. Oldknow, laughing at him. Tolly tried hard to obey her, but their beaks and little wiry clutching hands felt so queer that he had to shut his eyes and screw up his face to keep still. The tits hung on underneath and tickled in unexpected places. While he was standing there pulling faces, he heard a laugh so like a boy's that he could not believe his great-grandmother had made it, and opened his eyes to see who was there. There was no one else. Mrs. Oldknow's eyes were fixed on his. The blackbirds were scolding in the branches because they were afraid to come on to his hands, and could see that the margarine was nearly finished. Then, with a squabbling noise like a crowd of rude people off a football bus, a flock of starlings arrived, snatching and pushing and behaving badly in every way. "That will do," said Mrs. Oldknow. "Starlings don't wait to be introduced to anybody. I'll give them some bread, and you can wipe your hands on these crusts and throw them to the blackbirds. Then run and wash your hands." She shut the door and sat down to breakfast. Tolly came quickly and sat down where a place was laid for him opposite the fireplace. While he was eating, he was looking around again at the room, which was so different by daylight, though just as unusual, with all its big windows looking out onto the water. Suddenly he saw something he had not noticed at all the night before, when the room had been full of firelight and shadows. Over the fireplace hung a large oil painting of a family, 3 children and 2 ladies. There were 2 handsome boys wearing lace collars and dark green silk suits. They had long hair but looked anything but girlish. The elder of the 2, who might be 14 years old, was wearing a sword, and it looked so natural to him that Tolly was filled with hero worship. He had his hand on the collar of a tame deer. The younger brother had a book under his arm and a flute in his hand. The little girl had a smile of irrepressible high spirits that seemed to defy the painter to do a serious portrait of her. She was holding a chaffinch, and beside her on the ground was an open wicker cage. One of the 2 ladies was young and beautiful. At her feet was a little curly white dog with a black face. On her arm, a basket of roses. The other lady was old and dressed in black. They all had large dark eyes, and all their eyes seemed fixed on Tolly. If he moved to one side, all eyes moved after him. "Granny, they're all looking at me." "I'm not surprised. You have only just come. They must be tired of looking at me." "Who are they?" "They are the Oldknows, your family. The boy with the deer is Toby, the other with the flute is Alexander, and the little girl is called Lynette. She is 6 years old. That is their mother in the blue dress." "My mother was called Lynette," said Tolly. "And that's you behind them." "It's their grandmother, Mrs. Oldknow." "Is this their house?" "Yes." They lived here. When did they live here? Oh, a long time ago, said Mrs. Oldknowe, fidgeting and being suddenly very busy about the breakfast table. But Tolly was only 7, and to him a long time ago meant more than 7 years. 5 lively pairs of eyes were challenging him to ignore them. Lynette was laughing straight into his. Even the dog looked as if it would play. "Has Toby got a real sword?" he asked. "Yes, of course." "Why?" "Because he's going to be a soldier. His father gave it to him when he was 13. "Is Alexander going to be a musician?" "He will go to the university. He wants to be a poet." "And Lynette?" "Oh, my little Lynette." "Oh," said Tolly, interrupting, "that's the birdcage in my room. It's the birdcage. It made such funny shadows on the ceiling when you put the nightlight under it. Is the doll's house Lynette's?" "No, the doll's house was mine. When I was a little girl, I was brought up here by my uncle, because I was an orphan." "Did you have brothers and sisters?" "No, but I played that I had. I was lonely. That's why I put 4 beds in the doll's house." "Did you play that they were your brothers and sisters?" said Tolly, pointing to the picture. Mrs. Oldknowe looked hard at him. "Yes, my dear." "How did you know?" "Because I think that is what I shall play. Do you want to read the newspaper now?" "Good gracious, no, child. What should I do that for? The world doesn't alter every day. As far as I can see, it's always the same. But I have plenty to do, so you must amuse yourself. Can you?" "Oh, yes, I would like to go up to the rocking horse and the mouse. Can I play with a cage if I reach it?" "You can play with anything you like, if you are careful. Don't fall out of the window." Tolly took 2 lumps of sugar from the bowl. "For the horse," he said. "Can I?" He ran upstairs to his room, as happy as a little boy could be.